Everyone tells you Carl Jung identified universal patterns of the psyche. That answer is true. It is also strangely insufficient, because what an INFJ feels reading Jung is not interest. It is something closer to homecoming. There is a reason for this, and it is older than personality theory. There is a kind of person who has always been here. They go by different names in different centuries: the cunning woman, the hermit, the witness, the seer, the exile. The world has tried more than once to be rid of them. The world has never managed it. If you carry one of these patterns, you already know. Today we walk into the architecture beneath the INFJ. The 7 figures Carl Jung's method draws out, when you apply it carefully to a mind built like yours. The common explanation goes like this. Jung identified universal psychological patterns. He called them archetypes. He believed they live in something he called the collective unconscious, a layer of the psyche shared by all human beings across cultures and time. INFJs, being intuitive and pattern-oriented, naturally gravitate to this kind of language. That is the explanation most people receive, and it is not wrong. Jung did identify the archetypal layer of the psyche. He spent decades cataloguing the figures that appear in dreams, myths, and religious imagery across continents. He named the shadow, the anima and animus, the self, the wise old man, the great mother, and the trickster. He proposed that these figures were not learned but inherited, woven into the structure of consciousness itself. He also developed the framework of psychological types, in which the INFJ pattern sits. Introverted intuition dominant. A mind that reads pattern before content, meaning before detail, depth before surface. So when an INFJ encounters Jung, the explanation runs, they meet a thinker whose vocabulary fits their cognition. They feel recognized, they feel less alone. That is what archetypal psychology offers them. And on most channels, this is where the conversation ends. The viewer is told to take a quiz. Find their archetype, pick from a list of 12 or 16 tidy figures. The caregiver, the magician, the innocent, pin it to a board, wear it like a badge. This explanation captures something true. INFJs do gravitate to Jung. Jung did identify archetypes. The collective unconscious is a real proposal in his body of work. Pattern recognition is, structurally, what NI does best. But sit with this for a moment. Notice what the explanation does not account for. It does not account for why the recognition feels personal rather than intellectual. Why an INFJ encountering the hermit figure in Jung's writing does not think, how interesting. They think, that is me. That has always been me. It does not account for why pop versions of Jungian archetypes feel hollow, whilst the original work feels like blood. The tidy lists of 12. The marketing personas with their names and their colours. It does not account for why some INFJs spend their whole lives orbiting these patterns, whilst others touch the language once and walk away unmoved. The surface explanation says INFJs like Jung because they are intuitive. That is true. It is also somehow not enough. So let us ask the harder question. What if INFJs do not gravitate to archetypal psychology because they are pattern recognizers? What if archetypal psychology gravitates to them because their cognition is, structurally, already living in that layer? This is a different proposition. The first says the INFJ is good at reading archetypes. The second says the INFJ mind is itself an archetypal instrument. That introverted intuition is not metaphor reading. It is a direct perception of the same structural patterns Jung was mapping from the outside. Hold that for a moment, because if it is true, several other things start to make sense. Explains why the recognition feels like homecoming rather than learning. You cannot learn what you have always been reading. You can only be told there is a name for the thing you have been doing without permission, your whole life. It explains why the 12 neat archetype quizzes feel insulting. The nigh-dominant mind perceives the archetypal layer in motion, in contradiction, in shadow, and gift braided together. A tidy list of 12 cannot hold that. The original Jung, ragged and overwhelming, can. It explains why certain INFJs cannot let archetypal psychology go, even when they try. They are not enthusiasts. They are practitioners of a craft they did not know had a name. The reading is involuntary. The pattern arrives whether they invite it or not. Now ask another question. What did Jung actually do? He did not produce a closed list of archetypes. He died still cataloguing The collected works are full of figures named once and never tidied into a master taxonomy. The wise old man, the trickster, the divine child, Sophia, Chiron the wounded healer, the hermit of the tarot, the shadow itself. He gave us a method, not a final list. And here is the question beneath the question. Jung gave us a method. The INFJ mind already operates in the layer that his method maps. So what happens when you apply that method carefully and specifically to the recurring figures of INFJ life? What emerges? Not 12, not 16, 7. 7 patterns that rise up with such consistency in the lives of INFJs, across cultures, across centuries, across class, gender and circumstance. They ask to be named. This is what the power and myth tradition has been mapping. Not new archetypes invented for a YouTube channel. Older figures pulled forward from Jung's foundational work and the archetypal psychology tradition that built on it, then sharpened against the specific cognitive shape of the INFJ. And this is where the surface explanation finally runs out, because the surface explanation says you like Jung. The depth explanation says you are one of 7 figures Jung's method recognizes in the mirror. I want you to sit with that distinction. It changes what the rest of this video is going to do. Here is what Jung's method draws out when applied to the INFJ pattern. The seer, the one who perceives what others cannot and pays for the seeing. Cassandra's curse lives here, to know and to know early and to be disbelieved. The wounded healer, Chiron's lineage, the one whose own deepest injury becomes the organ through which they perceive other people's injuries. The wound is not a flaw to fix, it is the instrument, the hermit, the lantern bearer from the tarot, drawn directly out of Jung's amplification work, the figure who must go into the dark alone because that is where the necessary thing is found, the exile, permanently outside the village, not banished, not rejected, simply never quite belonging and not surprised by that fact. The shapeshifter, the one who wears different faces in different rooms, not from deception, from the exhausting requirement of translating between worlds that do not share a language. The guardian of thresholds, the one who stands at the edge between worlds and helps others cross whilst remaining on the threshold themselves. The seeker, the pilgrim who knows, somewhere underneath, that arrival exists. The meaning hunger, that nothing surface ever satisfies. These are not supernatural claims. They are Jungian archetypal psychology. They are descriptions of how introverted intuition, the dominant function of the INFJ, processes the same unconscious layer Jung spent his career mapping. The collective unconscious is not mysticism. It is Jung's term for shared psychological structures that exist across cultures and time. NI perceives those structures directly, and every one of these 7 carries its shadow. The seer can curdle into paranoia, the wounded healer can lose herself in other people's pain, the hermit can mistake isolation for solitude, the exile can wear outsiderhood as an identity rather than as truth, the shapeshifter can lose the original face entirely, the guardian can stand at the threshold so long she forgets she was allowed to cross, the seeker can become addicted to the seeking and refuse arrival. This is the part that the tidy lists do not tell you. The gift and the wound are the same organ of perception. I have watched this pattern for a long time. Living any of these archetypes without naming it is what produces the suffering INFJs describe. Naming the pattern does not make the wound disappear, but it changes what you see when you look in the mirror. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are not failing at being normal. You are running an ancient pattern that the modern world has forgotten how to name. And there are 7 of them. Not 12, not 16. 7 that Jung's own method draws out when you apply it carefully. If this has landed somewhere it needed to land, then you may already know what comes next. There are 7 Sigma INFJ archetypes, and each one carries a different gift, a different burden, a different mythic responsibility. The link in the description will take you to a free assessment that reveals yours. It takes about 3 minutes. The answer tends to land harder than people expect, and if you want to keep walking these threads with me into the deeper psychology of the Sigma INFJ, into the archetypes the world has forgotten how to name, subscribe, there are far older and stranger things still to uncover. Until next time. Find your power, know your myth,